Beyond the cockpit windshield, only a white wall remains, yet the aircraft is still descending toward the ground. The runway lies directly ahead, but inside the rain, it has almost vanished from the pilot's world. More than 160 people are inside, while only a few minutes remain to make the next decision. Just a few hundred feet above the ground, strong tailwinds can turn a wet runway into an unsafe choice. At the next airport, runway visibility again falls to only a few hundred meters amid thunderstorms and heavy rain. By ordinary logic, an aircraft unable to see its landing place should have already run out of escape routes. It cannot stop in midair, nor can it search indefinitely like a car driving along a road. If the pilots force the landing, one unstable approach can erase every remaining safety margin. If the alternate airport is also blocked by weather, every additional circuit consumes another part of the available options. And if the decision comes too late, time is no longer measured in minutes, but in fuel. Yet the aircraft does not continue downward. It raises its nose, adds power, and returns to the sky. Inside the cockpit, a rehearsed sequence replaces the instinct to complete the landing at all costs. The escape is not a miracle, but several backup layers activated at precisely the right moment. That aircraft was Vistara Flight 944, traveling from Mumbai to Delhi during a day of violent monsoon storms. It became a needle searching for a tiny opening in the fog, between weather, fuel, and decision pressure. To understand that situation, the story must begin with how a massive runway can suddenly disappear. Heavy rain does more than hide objects. It scatters light and gradually erases the contrast ahead. Fog contains countless tiny water droplets, enough to turn familiar distance into a depthless white curtain. Inside a thunderstorm, wind direction can change faster than the forecasts prepared before departure. A tailwind pushes the aircraft faster across the ground, increasing the runway distance needed to stop. When the pavement is wet, tires and brakes must work under less favorable conditions than on a dry runway. That is why seeing the runway is not enough. The aircraft must also have the correct position, speed, and configuration. A safe approach resembles a narrow corridor where several conditions must remain within limits at the same time. Too high, too fast, or misaligned can leave too little distance to correct the error safely. Therefore, pilots do not wait until touchdown to decide whether the approach remains safe. They use decision gates where continuing the landing or climbing away must become a clear choice. Below a certain altitude, if the required visual references have not appeared, the landing normally must be abandoned. Those limits do not test bravery. They prevent people from being tempted to continue through uncertainty. Aviation history includes many accidents in which crews tried to rescue approaches that were already unstable. The lesson gradually became clear. A runway is not a compulsory target, but an option only when conditions permit. From that lesson came a cold rule. When conditions are wrong, the aircraft must leave. But leaving the runway does not end the problem. It only moves the struggle into altitude and fuel. The crew must now answer a new question: try again, wait, or divert somewhere else. Every option depends on clouds, wind, traffic, distance, and the fuel that remains available. A disrupted landing therefore becomes a moving puzzle in which every piece of information keeps changing. The most important response to an unsuitable runway is simply to fly back upward. A go-around is not an improvised turn, but a designed sequence for regaining safe altitude. Power is increased first, because the aircraft must convert fuel into altitude before doing anything else. The nose rises to a calculated angle, steep enough to climb without allowing airspeed to fall dangerously. The flaps are not retracted immediately, because changing lift too quickly could destabilize the aircraft. The landing gear is also retracted in sequence, reducing drag after the aircraft establishes a safe climb. Within seconds, the crew must fly, confirm the configuration, and listen to air traffic control instructions. The pilot flying concentrates on the flight path. The other pilot checks the aircraft, communicates, and detects deviations. This division prevents both pilots from becoming trapped in one detail and losing the wider picture. After stabilizing the climb, the aircraft follows the missed approach route prepared for that particular runway. This route keeps the aircraft clear of terrain, buildings, and active traffic flows around the airport. Controllers simultaneously create space, because a climbing arrival may cross the path of departing aircraft. If the weather change is brief, the crew may circle and prepare for another approach. But every holding circuit must be purchased with fuel. and nobody knows exactly when the clouds will move away. When waiting is no longer reasonable, the next option is to divert toward an airport where landing is possible. The alternate airport is not chosen after trouble begins. It is usually included in the plan beforehand. Distance, weather, runway length, and the ability to serve the aircraft type all influence that choice. The plan creates a second escape route, but that route also depends on a constantly changing sky. Therefore, the crew always needs a backup plan for the first backup plan itself. A simple go-around has developed into an entire decision network extending far beyond the cockpit. Before the aircraft leaves the gate, dispatchers combine route, weather, payload, and fuel into one plan. Fuel is divided by purpose instead of treating everything inside the wings as one common reserve. One portion covers taxiing, another covers the journey, and another handles expected deviations from the plan. When an alternate is required, the plan must also contain enough fuel to leave the destination and reach it. Finally comes the final reserve, fuel that is not meant to be consumed whenever convenient. The final reserve exists so the aircraft can keep flying after the earlier layers of planning have failed. Alongside fuel, the flight file contains alternate airports, wind forecasts, cloud conditions, and possible delays. A forecast does not promise the future. It only describes what may happen during a certain period. Therefore, weather information must keep being updated while the aircraft has already spent hours in flight. Air traffic control reports visibility, wind, and approach order, but the pilots still make the final decision. A landing clearance only reserves the runway. It does not guarantee that conditions suit the aircraft. Pilots must confirm that wind, visibility, runway condition, and landing performance remain within acceptable limits. Before descending, they agree on the route, limits, missed approach procedure, and diversion airport if needed. That brief conversation prevents later decisions from starting at zero when the workload becomes intense. Airlines also establish stable approach standards, requiring the aircraft to be ready for landing early enough. If speed, altitude, alignment, or descent rate is unstable, the rules normally require a go-around. The rule turns a difficult choice into the default reaction, reducing the chance that confidence overrules limits. Inside a simulator, pilots repeat this situation until the correct action becomes stronger than hesitation. They also practice delayed engine response, sudden wind changes, and new instructions from air traffic control. Cabin crews are prepared as well, because thrust and flight angle can change just before touchdown. Passengers may hear the engines roar, but to the crew, it is the sound of safety margin returning. When fuel limits the options, minimum fuel warns that the flight cannot accept significant additional delay. This is not necessarily an emergency yet, but controllers must understand that every change now carries consequences. If landing is expected below final reserve, the crew must declare a fuel emergency in unmistakable language. From that moment, the airport, controllers, and ground services focus together on clearing a path for the aircraft. To land in low visibility, aircraft often follow radio signals guiding them toward the runway centerline. The first component keeps the aircraft aligned with an invisible extension of the runway centerline. The second component guides the descent angle, preventing the aircraft from diving too steeply or remaining too high. Together they form an invisible corridor, but they cannot stop the rain or prevent the wind from changing. At decision altitude, pilots must have enough outside visual reference to continue the final landing phase. If the lights appear in the correct position, they shift from instrument guidance to visual confirmation. If they do not appear, the needle has not found the opening in the fog, and the aircraft must climb. Runway visibility is measured near the ground because pilots need to know what they will actually see during landing. That value can change rapidly when a curtain of rain moves across the runway threshold. Therefore, conditions reported minutes earlier may no longer be valid when the aircraft reaches the final stage. Automation can maintain extremely precise alignment, but only under the correct conditions and certifications. The runway, aircraft, crew, and ground equipment must all meet requirements for an automatic landing. If one link does not qualify, automation cannot transform unsafe conditions into safe ones. After a go-around, computers continuously estimate the fuel remaining for each option along the new route. That estimate changes with wind, altitude, speed, detours, and any additional waiting time. Lower flight often burns more fuel, but traffic or weather may prevent the aircraft from climbing efficiently. A weather diversion can be far longer than the straight route used in the original fuel plan. Therefore, map distance matters less than the route. The aircraft is actually permitted and able to fly. When diverting, pilots request the shortest route, but controllers must still protect separation and restricted airspace. Air traffic control cannot create more fuel. It can only remove obstacles within its control. Controllers can reduce holding, prioritize the approach, and keep other aircraft away from the emergency flight path. Rescue vehicles may be positioned in advance, not because an accident is certain, but to add another protective layer. Meanwhile, the crew keeps a simple priority: fly the aircraft, determine its position, and then communicate. That order prevents radio conversations from stealing the attention required to keep the aircraft safe. Messages must remain short and clear because the same frequency may serve many aircraft in bad weather. Standard emergency phrases are designed to cut through static, different accents, and the pressure of the moment. Minimum fuel means the buffer is nearly gone. Mayday fuel means final reserve is expected to be breached. Neither call admits failure. Both tools help the entire system respond at the correct level. On a normal flight, reserve fuel remains nearly invisible. Its purpose appears only when the plan breaks apart. It buys time for a go-around, a detour, a holding pattern, or a flight toward another airport. But fuel only purchases options. It cannot guarantee cooperation from weather, traffic, or airports. Therefore, the best decision is usually made before fuel becomes the main problem. This requires pilots to look beyond the airport ahead and continually update the whole surrounding region. The Ground Operations Center has a wider view, monitoring several airports and weather systems at once. It may identify a closer airport under clear skies while the crew sees only a thunderstorm wall ahead. The value of dispatch is not commanding the pilots, but supplying the missing part of the picture. Inside the cockpit, the captain remains responsible for selecting a safe landing place from the available information. The first officer must clearly raise concerns when a decision begins eliminating too many options. Crew resource management turns disagreement into a safety layer instead of treating silence as discipline. The entire mechanism resembles several nets, each catching deviations that the previous layer failed to stop. Yet the multi-layered system has weaknesses. Every option consumes time, fuel, and human concentration. Holding appears safe because it keeps the aircraft away from the ground, but each circuit reduces later margins. Another approach may succeed, but failure consumes fuel during both the descent and the climb. As the limits approach, the mind becomes more likely to cling to hope that the airport will reopen. This is called fixation, when one target occupies attention while surrounding options disappear. Pressure does not require panic. It can appear as a series of reasonable decisions made too late. An alternate convenient for the airline may not be the best choice when storms shift across the region. The airport with better staff, stairs, and passenger services may lie behind a dangerous band of weather. A closer airport may lack normal support, but during an emergency, safety must come before convenience. However, an unfamiliar airport adds work. Approach routes, equipment, operating hours, and rescue capability need confirmation. If the airport is absent from the database, the crew may lose familiar automated support used on normal flights. Without suitable approach information, a runway on the map becomes difficult to use in cloud, rain, or darkness. Weather at the airport is not the whole story. Weather along the route can also block access. An airport reporting clear skies may still lie beyond many miles of convection that should not be crossed. As storm bands move, the best option 10 minutes ago may become the worst option now. Controllers also face pressure because they must insert an urgent aircraft into traffic that is already busy. When many flights avoid the same storm, nearby airports can quickly receive unexpected traffic. An empty runway does not guarantee immediate landing. Safe separation between aircraft must still be protected. Carrying extra fuel creates more margin, but its weight also makes the aircraft burn more throughout the flight. Fuel planning therefore balances backup capability, efficiency, weather, and delays that can reasonably be expected. Danger appears when fuel intended for one option is consumed before another option is clearly selected. At that point, every weather change becomes more than inconvenience. It removes another path from the available choices. The busier pilots become finding a runway, the less time remains to examine how their options became so narrow. Small deviations in planning, weather, and communication can then stack together into a serious situation. Vistara 944 shows that no major failure is required. Several safety layers only need to become thin together. On July 15, 2019, UK 944 departed Mumbai for what was expected to be a routine journey to Delhi. The aircraft carried 155 passengers and 7 crew members, placing 162 people on the route to the capital. The flight remained normal until descent began and severe weather was seen covering Delhi. Strong winds, thunderstorms, and traffic forced the aircraft to wait while the crew monitored the remaining fuel. When guided toward the runway, the crew knew a missed approach would significantly reduce the fuel margin. Near the ground, the wind shifted into a tailwind beyond the suitable limit for the aircraft on the wet runway. The crew did not try to rescue the landing. They added power, raised the nose, and went around. That decision was safe at Delhi, but it created a new problem: finding a runway before the buffer disappeared. The crew selected Lucknow, an alternate familiar to the airline, and requested routing after avoiding thunderstorms. Weather blocked the path, forcing the aircraft roughly 40 nautical miles south of the expected route. As it approached Lucknow, conditions worsened and UK 944 became third in the arriving sequence. The crew reported they could accept no further delay because another hold could create a low fuel situation. The controller said there was no delay, but the aircraft ahead of UK 944 went around because of weather. UK 944 began its approach, but runway visibility was reported falling from 475 meters to 275 meters. The runway disappeared again, and at 12:46, the crew discontinued the approach at Lucknow. After the second missed approach, the aircraft waited for improvement while predicted landing fuel continued falling. The crew declared minimum fuel, then escalated to Mayday fuel when final reserve could no longer be protected. The objective was no longer the most convenient airport, but the nearest place where a safe landing was possible. Kanpur was considered, but weather along the route changed the crew's intention toward Prayagraj. Neither airport was available in the aircraft's normal navigation database for routine operations. While UK 944 headed toward Prayagraj, controllers reported that visibility at Lucknow had begun improving. The aircraft was about 58 miles from Prayagraj, but only around 37 miles from Lucknow with very little fuel. When Lucknow reported further improvement, the crew turned back and requested the shortest route to the runway. The final approach carried a heavy workload, but the aircraft maintained its path and landed safely. UK 944 stopped with 348 kilograms of fuel remaining. Nobody was injured, and the aircraft was undamaged. The investigation did not treat the event as one isolated error, but examined the entire chain of planning and decisions. The report found that alternate airport information in the flight preparation documents was not completely consistent. Such ambiguity can create invisible pressure, favoring an airline-convenient airport over a potentially safer option. The investigation also emphasized more active monitoring of weather along the route and at alternate airports. One airport weather report cannot replace a regional picture showing a storm line blocking the entire route. Operations centers were encouraged to support earlier diversion instead of waiting until fuel became a source of pressure. The flight plan and briefing materials should identify the same alternate, preventing crews from receiving two different pictures. When severe weather is forecast, holding fuel should be added instead of being taken from diversion fuel. Airlines were encouraged to train the exact moments for declaring minimum fuel and escalating to Mayday fuel. Declaring early does not worsen the situation. It gives the system more time to prevent further deterioration. Crews also need practice using emergency authority when the safest option differs from the normally convenient one. Navigation databases should include more usable airports, giving aircraft additional tools during abnormal situations. Prepared approach procedures can turn an unfamiliar emergency runway into a practical option. The report also emphasized that first officers must speak strongly enough when they see conditions worsening. Experience does not eliminate cognitive bias. Active challenge inside the cockpit helps expose it earlier. Lucknow controllers contributed significantly by repeatedly reporting improving visibility and suggesting the aircraft return. This shows how safety can depend on correct information transmitted quickly within a very narrow moment. But the system should not wait for a rescue moment. The goal is preventing flights from reaching that limit. Better data matters only when people are willing to change the plan before too few options remain. The largest lesson after UK 944 is not flying better during an emergency, but preventing the emergency from forming. The most common misunderstanding is that losing sight of the runway means the aircraft is lost and an accident is imminent. In reality, the aircraft still knows its position. Conditions simply prevent the final phase from being completed safely. A go-around is not a failed landing. It is the correct result when conditions fail to meet requirements. A professional pilot is judged not by always landing, but by the quality of the decisions made. Air traffic controllers do not fly the aircraft and cannot order pilots to continue an unsafe landing. A landing clearance opens the runway for traffic. The decision to descend remains inside the cockpit. Autoland is not a pair of eyes that sees through all weather. It depends on equipment, certification, and wind limits. Reserve fuel does not mean an aircraft can circle for hours. Every portion has a planned purpose. Minimum fuel is not Mayday fuel. One protects the buffer, while the other confirms an emergency. An alternate airport is not a compulsory destination. It is a prepared option that may change for safety. Diversion is not merely changing an airport name. It changes distance, altitude, traffic, weather, and fuel consumption. UK 944 does not prove backup plans are useless. It proves they work only when protected by early decisions. The modern aviation turning point is refusing to treat the selected runway as a target that must be conquered. The real destination is not one specific city, but any runway that allows the flight to end safely. A successful flight may not reach the expected airport, yet still bring everyone safely to the ground. New technology provides more detailed weather views, helping crews see trends rather than one isolated report. Data from many flights can help predict areas likely to experience go-arounds, delays, or approach congestion. But a more accurate forecast still requires people to act before it becomes an emergency warning. Safety culture matters as much as equipment. Nobody should be judged weak for abandoning an approach. When go-arounds become normal, pilots are less tempted to turn a poor approach into a personal test. When diversion is chosen early, the alternate stops being a final escape and becomes an active plan. When fuel is reported early, air traffic control can reorganize traffic before every minute becomes expensive. When first officers are encouraged to challenge, fixation can be broken before it closes every option. No layer is perfect, but independent layers make it harder for one deviation to lead directly to an accident. Safety does not come from eliminating every surprise, but from preserving enough choices when surprises arrive repeatedly. Therefore, the strongest cockpit decision may simply be accepting that this particular landing must end. Beneath thinning rain, the lights of another runway appear directly in the center of the cockpit windshield. The needle finally finds the tiny opening in the fog, not through luck, but because one option was preserved. The landing gear touches the wet pavement, spray rises, and the fuel countdown ends on the ground. Aviation safety is not about always landing, but about knowing when to abandon one landing at the right moment.